building up a platform where hope can
Welcome to the Nikki Clarke Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nikki Clarke, and the show is where we are transforming lives one story at a time. And today we're exploring the powerful connection between our emotions, mindset, and overall well-being with Curt Knuth, an Ottawa-based energy healer, mindset coach, and creator of the emotional release process, or ERP. Curt's work focuses on helping people identify and release trapped emotions that may be connected to stress, anxiety, and physical discomfort. And through his emotional release process, he encourages people to move through 3 stages: enlighten, release, and process, developing awareness, letting go of what no longer serves them, and transforming pain into personal power. And his message is centered on healing, transformation, and belief that greater peace of mind and personal change can be within reach. Curt, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki, for having me. I really appreciate it. Hello, everyone.
It's an absolute pleasure. So, Curt, before we get into the emotional release process, tell us about your personal journey and what led you to become an energy healer and mindset coach.
Yeah, so an interesting thing that happens to all of us is we have this kind of moment in our lives where we self-evaluate. And I think it's a transition in life that's natural, and it all depends on what we decide to do with it. And this particular time in my life, things seemed like they were falling apart at the time. And it didn't only seem like it was falling apart, it just seemed like every day was getting worse. I was in certain circumstances that I attempted to control, and the more I tried to control it, the more they fell apart. And this was in 2017. And it really had me kind of reflecting on my life. And for a time, I chose to wake up every day and kind of rehearse how terrible my life was. And it was like it had all my focus. I would compare myself to friends, family, those around me. I would, blame. Blame was kind of my scapegoat. It's everyone else. It's everything else. It's not me. And then thankfully one day I came across a video that talked about self-development and how you can completely change your life and step into a new one. And having tons of time on my hands, I decided to join a free seminar. And in the seminar, it was more or less a way to sell products, and they were looking for people to jump on board. So I really wasn't interested in that because it took investing, and I was someone at that time who didn't have a dollar to my name. And I was really depressed. The thing that enticed me out of the whole title was, how do you change your life? How do you transform your life? How do you step out of a life that you've put so much effort into and basically start over? And I asked the host if I could, or the host asked anybody to comment a certain word, and that would mean that they want to set up an appointment with you. Well, when we got on to the appointment, I came clean and I said I wasn't interested in getting involved in selling anything. And I asked her, I said, I'm more interested how you had the courage to change your life completely. Now, she was a lawyer and she was making a lot of money, but she wasn't happy. Mm-hmm. And she was middle-aged and she had invested a lot of time into this. And we could all understand that being a lawyer, it takes a lot of schooling, it takes a lot of money, and takes a lot of dedication. And then for that matter, you kind of have to live up to your word where you get hired and then devote yourself to your work. And yet she somehow decided to let go of certainty and embrace uncertainty. And it really excited me. Although she wasn't super impressed that I wasn't interested in signing up, but she did say that she would share something with me. And she mentioned a book by Rhonda Byrne called The Magic. And it's just a short little book with 28-day practices. Most of them are geared towards gratitude and self-love, which at the time was 5,000 miles away from me because I didn't love myself at all. And it really challenges you to just have simple daily practices to remind yourself what you're grateful for and to encourage you to express self-care and love to yourself. Now, really, I had thought I had everything figured out in my life at that time. I was a carpenter and I was really big into sports, and I was dating someone else at the time, and I kind of thought everything was all leading in the right direction where we would just create a family and have the white picket fence. And I was like, finally, I'm a somebody. And of course, that all shattered. And the practices were so simple. And as a result of all the things that shattered in my life, I had to move back into my parents, and I was 37 years old at the time. So that's something that makes you very vulnerable and makes you feel like a failure and a lot of fear. And like most mothers, they know their children, and my mother knew I was not happy. Although only 2 weeks of this, I would say, silly practice of gratitude. At the time, it was silly to me, but I had nothing better to do at that time. And this silly little practice began to have effect on me, so much so that I remember one day my mom came up to me and she grabbed my arm and she whispered in my ear and she said, "Son, whatever you're doing, keep doing it." And, she had no idea that I got this book. She had no idea that I started practicing self-love. And for anyone listening, it was really, I thought I was lying to myself when I said I love myself, because everything outside of me was a representation of how much I didn't love myself. And it really does shift your life once we start to focus on these things. And these simple little practices, without me even vocalizing it, someone in my life who knew me noticed that something had shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was like, I was so eager to get downstairs and continue reading the book out of curiosity. I mean, if it revealed that for me, what else could it reveal? And then, like all of us, I became really curious and I wanted to learn everything. I started studying self help books, and that led me to understanding that there is more out there. And that curiosity through my research led to suggestions of energy healing, which I had no idea what it was. Because since I became this discoverer of more that is right on our fingertips that we really don't see all the time. And I believe it's because we all have rose-colored glasses on, but I started to wipe the lenses and I started to see more of myself. And then I thought, okay, well, this is exciting. Is there more I could learn? And again, for anybody listening, I used to be really rough and rigid and one of the boys. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I just thought there wasn't any more to life. And then through all this stuff, I discovered that there was so much more that I didn't know. And then it really helped me understand that there is so much more that we don't understand. And then, of course, the idea that we could believe that there is more, it kind of sends you on a whole other journey. And you kind of keep that to yourself at first. And then, so what ended up happening with me was I started studying with Reiki and learning the principles. And Reiki is a lot of really positive suggestion and positive energy. And I got into hypnosis through a company in the UK. And I was more fascinated with the professors learning more about the mind. So I would read books that they would suggest, and it kind of led me on this journey of practicality. So I would apply these practices with people, when I started noticing something over the years of understanding it, I was really grateful that there was these mild adjustments in people that I could facilitate. And it was fun. And at the same time, I was questioning, what's with this idea of dependency that it's almost like we just shift our dependencies all over the place, and then we become dependent on something else, and nothing really seems to stick. And
Mhm.
I kind of dared to say, well, what if there could be another way?
Yeah.
So I would ask questions internally, and some of the things that I wanted to know is who and what we are, and since I have since then learned that you know, we're created perfectly and we don't really even understand everything about us. I mean, if we were to think about discoveries today, there are discoveries everywhere. So that would mean that we once thought we knew everything and then now we're discovering more. That's not going to change. That's going to continue to grow as we all grow as a race. And there's always going to be more to learn. So even when we
Mhm.
conclude something today, it's simply a new beginning for tomorrow and there's more to learn. And that's kind of how I look at things. So I thought, well, then what's our operating system? Because if we can't completely shift someone just by touching them, can we assist them into seeing more of themselves? But then I
Right.
thought, if we have an operating system, then I want to know more about it. And so we all have emotions. I don't believe there's anybody out there that doesn't. Even in the emotion of anger is still an emotion. The emotion of numbness is still an emotion. So everyone has emotions. And I began this discovery what the effect emotions have on us, and can we trap them? And I mean, can we feel like they're still with us? And it's like as if I gave you a bag full of rocks and I just said, put it on for a second. And let's say you never took that bag of rocks off, you would begin to feel like that's who you are. You would begin to just naturally feel heavy. And that's kind of how we take on emotions our whole lives. We begin to have emotions as young children, but yet we have nowhere to express them and release them. So if we're to think of the emotion of insecurity, if we split it into two words, it's in and secure. So we have an emotion of insecurity when we're a child, but we have no idea what to do with it. We're scared to express it, so we hold it within. It's like we throw away the key, and then we progress through life and we begin to have more insecure thoughts. And then these emotions become heavier and heavier and heavier, but we don't have any way of releasing them, and no way of understanding them more. So we've developed a habit of I'm strong because I'm holding on to these emotions. And that affects our health in so many ways. I have seen it so many times because I've had the pleasure of working with so many clients. And then we're surprised as adults why we still have insecure thoughts.
Mhm.
And so again, here we are without true understanding of our capabilities, because if we have the capability of holding on to something and make it real based on our focus, you know, then that should really draw some curiosity on what else is possible for us. If one is possible, that means many are possible. So the idea of can we release these, I began to study other authors who write on these topics and gained insight on emotions and the effect they have. And then I started understanding energy work more with the practicality that's out there today with all the literature, and what effects that these things have on the body. And one of my clients, when I was working with her with Reiki, she had fibromyalgia, and the area of her body that was really affected was her lower back and hips. And one day I came in and I asked her, because I felt like I had enough information accumulated that I wanted to experiment. And I asked her if I could experiment with her. And of course, she was open to it because she trusted me. And what we did was we found emotions that were trapped in that area of her body, and we released 8 emotions. But something happened that neither of us could have predicted. And she was free of pain. And she was in tears because she was free of pain. And she's an older woman who had been dealing this for quite some time. And I think the tears were her accepting that this pain was just something she had to live with. And then in a matter of 45 minutes, we released 8 emotions that were trapped in this area of her body. And then she experienced relief. Now, I'm sharing this one story to be subtle with it, because a few weeks later, it turns out that the fibromyalgia had dissipated. And, out of my unknowing at that time, I couldn't say that this is why. So
Right.
so Nikki, that was kind of like a discovery for me, to learn more about it. And then since then, I've done well over 600 sessions, and I'm so grateful for that opportunity. And the chart is now a 7-page chart, and it's carefully crafted. It has been developed over the last 3.5 years. It has grown. Based off each individual client that I would work with, I would gain more insight. And it has been such a fascinating journey, to see what is possible with all of us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for walking us through that incredible journey. But in the time remaining, I really would love people to understand how you created the emotional release process, what it is, and what inspired you to develop it. And then also, ERP is built around Enlighten, release, and process. So can you walk us through those 3 stages as well?
Yeah. So emotional release process is the expression. So how I have this, a lot of quotes that I read over time, and all the old books that I would read, and I was open to everything. And I allowed myself not to be closed to anything, which helped me understand on a broader perspective different cultures and the literature that they would share. And since I didn't have any criticisms or biases towards what was being shared, I was really open to more. And my main goal was to learn so much more that I could be of service to each individual that I work with, because as a practitioner, I do feel that it is my responsibility to bring it. And I'm very well oriented into that direction when I work with people. So I choose to be professional about it and clear and concise. So how I came across that, one of the quotes that I really hold on to is perfect practice makes practice perfect. So I had a thought, why don't I join some fairs and events that are held in the city and offer free sessions to people? Because I learned that the more people I worked with, I learned more about ERP. So then what better way to do that than I offered 10-minute sessions. They were just quick sessions, and each person that I worked with got to release one emotion that they picked off a chart that resonated with them in the moment. And I can't even begin to describe the fascinating things that I discovered from it. I did 13 events in a year and a half. And each event, some events were only one day. And a day would consist of anywhere from 40 people to 60 people. 3 of the events were 2-day events. So if you did the math on that, it was almost like I sped up the process of individual working into compounded learning. And it was so fascinating because every time I worked with something, it taught me more about it. And people really love the physical part. And I could understand that if you've been dealing with chronic pain, Of course, you want to ask, can you help me with chronic pain? Because people are really dependent on certain things that don't really get to the source. And so that's a fun one. It is really fun. But we do have mental pain as well. And it really works with mental pain. I have so many examples, but I'm attempting to be respectful of the time. So if you look at, I'll just share. So here's page one. So I discovered that there's around 185 emotions that we attract in our whole body. And
Okay.
each page, each page kind of focuses on the lower half of our body, and then we go all the way up through the body. Okay. And it really helps me because it's curated its own self in front of my eyes, which again, I like to bring value to you as quickly as possible during a session because I really respect your time and my time, and I want to get somewhere. And a lot of the things that I've learned is I'll share a particular experience. There's a couple that come to mind with physical pain. One woman had been in an accident and she wanted to work on pain because her neck was affected and her shoulders and her ear and the side of her head. And we focused on that area and we discovered some emotions there. And I'll always sort out the emotions and I'll reserve some time at the end where we can focus on the physical pain to help her with the severity of it. Now, at the end, I noticed something really interesting. I had become accustomed to focusing on someone so much that I can help them reduce their pain, but something wasn't shifting. And I utilize a severity level of 5. 5 is terrible and horrible. 1 is beautiful and fine. And the idea is always to get to 0, which we always do. But in this particular case, we weren't. And I was so curious. But right at the end, she said, I forgot to tell you I just came from physio, which I kind of sat with for a while and I contemplated. And I discovered that I was tuning into the exhaustion of the muscles from the physio, not the actual pain itself, which of course was another whole fascinating discovery for me how the mind works. And then I'll share another example. I was working with a man who had moved some furniture in his house and he had a sore elbow and it wasn't getting better. And we started working on the elbow and we started releasing and he started feeling some relief in the pain. But then again, we weren't getting to 0 and I respected his time and I left. And what happened was in the end of it, we didn't release the pain, but he had reached out to me 3 days later and he'd confessed something. Him and his wife were struggling. They were having a really difficult time with their relationship and they were bottling it up. And he said, I couldn't help but think of that the whole time we were working together. But he's like, I have to tell you something that might help other people. It's completely resolved with my wife. All of a sudden, in an instant, it seemed like all the things that were causing us mental pain had disappeared. So here was another discovery where I was eager to work with my next client. And then the curious thing was, do you happen to be going through any mental pain? And then, of course, that was the discovery of that. So you can see how this chart built itself over time.
I love that. I love that. That's brilliant. So we're wrapping up to the final question. What's next for you and the ERP?
So I've shifted into understanding if I can shift my life, how did I do it? And what have I learned? And what are the nuances I've learned with shifting? And I've really understood that it is really about micro shifting. It's not about completely, pushing against everything going on in our life. It's figuring out a way to be at peace with where you're at. And there is a way to do that. And I figured it out. So now I utilize the chart as well as I do mindset coaching now. And together with the chart and the mindset coachings in these practices and these things that I suggest to clients after our session and in between sessions, it's fascinating where this is leading. And again, I am honored to work with so many people and continue to see them find themselves, and they
Mm,
become dependent on themselves, which is fascinating because, we're our strongest supporter. And I find it so important to keep my focus there. So that's where I keep my focus these days.
I love that. Curt, where can viewers learn more about you and your work?
So my website is www.vitasana, that's VITASANA dot VIP. So Victor, important person. So now, and then I have all the socials. You can just type in Vitasana on social medias and you'll find me. My social medias, I share short videos of things with literature that I have learned that people could easily share in their lives. Something when I discovered this stuff is I lived quite a busy lifestyle, and I thought I didn't have time for self-development because it was a I'll do it later kind of thing. So when I tried to meditate and read and walk in nature and do yoga and drink green smoothies, it seemed to be another daunting task that I had to put on my to-do list today. And it didn't feel good at the end of the day. It actually made me feel worse because I'm like, oh, now I'm failing at that. So I don't believe that it totally works, all the self-care stuff. And so I came up with tiny little things that only take 2 minutes, and some of them are as long as 5 minutes, and we all have 5 minutes. So those are some of the things that I share on my socials that people can express and enjoy in their own lives.
I love that. Thank you. And finally, Curt, what is one message of hope, healing, and transformation you'd like to leave with our audience today?
That it always gets better. Everything always gets better. It's difficult to see it in the moment. You know, it really, when humans, we tend to get really comfortable, and then we gear our focus on creating more comfort and more comfort. And when something challenges our comfort zone, we all get guarded. And there's a lot of things that if you could really research over time that have challenged society's comfort zones only to be embraced one day. So we may think that things are really challenging for us today, and maybe technology, people get fearful of it. Although if you just expand your container of what is possible in the world, you'll understand that one day we will all arrive at a place where we embrace it. And I think the quicker we
Mhm.
decide to be open to change, the easier things are on us. And if anything I could share is that it always gets better. And if you're thinking that, that you would want a different life or you would trade your life with anybody, I want you to think of this for a second. If you believe in there was anything at all that we would consider intelligent, that had anything to do with our creation, which I would think that you would talk to anybody, whether they don't believe in a higher power or not, you would believe that there's some kind of mathematical intelligence that is revealed to us everywhere. So that would mean that we would have to accept that intelligence did create it. And then if you agree with me, then you would agree that you're a part of that intelligence. And then if you would agree with that, then what you're telling me is that intelligence created you perfectly. And if you look in the mirror, you're looking at intelligence. You are intelligence. You are perfect. You always have been. So then what are you doing perfectly to impede your own perfection? And then if you just ask yourself that question, you do get insight on that. And then you can begin to be at peace with where you're at in your life. And then once we expand that, it's sometimes we resist some things, but when we expand that, we release the resistance. And then something reveals itself that has always been there in your life because everything is always present. And then it just finds its way into you. And then you begin to see that life is perfect and you are perfect and where you're at is perfect. And your focus is so important because so many have said it. We don't experience life, we experience what we're focused on in our lives. So if you're heavily focused on overwhelming thoughts that cause you discomfort, those thoughts are always expanding. And if you give yourself the grace to bring yourself to focus in another direction of everything is working out well, and at first it seems really silly to say those things, but those things expand too if you just give yourself the patience and the faith in your own self.
Beautiful. Curt, thank you for joining us and sharing your perspective on emotional healing, mindset, and transformation. Your work reminds us of the importance of becoming aware of what we carry, finding healthy ways to process our experiences, and recognizing the possibility of change. I wish you all the best, and I'm excited for what's coming next for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki, and thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Love it. Thank you so much. Curt Knuth, please follow him on social media. He's got an incredible process, emotional release process, and also Enlighten release process. Please do yourself a favor and connect with him. And I want to thank everyone who's watched today. So remember, be informed and be transformed. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye for now.